Welcome to En Route to Success, where we have raw, vulnerable conversations between Fitz DeSanto, Sam Boyer, and many talented individuals, unraveling the truths and principles of people's experiences, methods to grow, and discovering how to live a fulfilling lifestyle. Buckle up, the journey begins now. 3, 2, 1, and we're good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. It's an interesting and unique day today because I have to call my co-host by his last name because I'm joined by two Sam today. So one is Mr. Sam Bell, and of course, you guys know Boyer. Boyer, how are you today?
I am doing well as usual. Whenever we do these fits, I'm always excited, and really excited to meet the other Sam that I've been hearing so much about.
Hi. So, well, just a little bit of background with Mr. Bell here. I know that I've known him for a few years now. It actually came from the fitness side. And as we work out together in the same gym, we kind of got to know each other and really just we gelled together because of our values with our similarities. And then later on, I found out this huge surprise that he actually worked with as an athletic trainer in physical therapy with the Ravens and then also with Houston Astros while they won their World Series. So I'm going to let you talk more about that, Mr. Bell, but I want to welcome Mr. Bell to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. One thing, it hurts, but we actually lost that World Series by Game 7. So thanks for bringing that up, Fitz. That's all right, though. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
No, absolutely. And thank you for having the time. So about that, then let's start and jump into, usually what we do when we have a guest, we want to make sure that we get into a high overview of your origin, the background, and really what end up you doing what you do today, but just a high overview of where Mr. Bell is from, and from there up to what we're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a small little town in Connecticut. I have a twin brother, which, I think actually, believe it or not, I think that's actually where a lot of my competitive drive and competitive nature comes from, just always trying to match each other with everything. So growing up with a sibling, who my little brother, I'll give him shit all the time, 10 minutes older. I'm going to hold him to it. Got a little sister as well. My father actually built every house that we grew up in.
Wow.
So from like a work ethic standpoint, I credit a lot from there because he's the kind of guy where, manual labor, but at the same time for half the year, you're taking out these building loans, which puts you put a lot of stress on there. So it's kind of that work ethic and drive where if I don't work, I don't get paid.
Sure.
And then my mother is a nurse. So I feel like a lot of the medical side kind of comes from there. So, when everything kind of combined, I feel like I got, my work ethic, my competitive drive and the medical side from a lot of my upbringing. And that kind of led me to where I was that day. I thought at the time it was a unique story of where I tore my ACL and playing high school football. That kind of led me to appreciate the rehab and that standpoint there. But that kind of led me down the career path, starting at Purdue University, which I didn't know it at the time. Great place for athletic trainers. I eventually did my master's at West Virginia University as well, where that was also an athletic training. And I like to think that I got to where I am because of my skill level, but at the same time, a lot of it was kind of luck and being in the right place at the right time and having just these terrific mentors, which kind of pointed me in the right direction. And then from there, I did my doctorate in physical therapy from Columbia University. And I was fortunate enough that at the time in the NFL, there was a new collective bargaining agreement, which mandated that teams had a physical therapist on staff. And that happened to go into action right as I was getting out of school. So there were actually a couple teams looking for a physical therapist to hire at the time. And again, I like to think that it's how good I am, but it was being in the right place at the right time. And that my first job out of school, it was something where like graduation was May 10th, but I had actually started on May 2nd with the team. So I started in some OTAs with the team. So it's pretty cool before I even graduated.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, the way I gathered on that story, well, thank you for sharing that story. It was really, I love the background and where you grew up. Here's the thing. I'm gonna do my thing, Sam. I'm gonna peel it off.
I know exactly what you're about to do.
So I think Bell, I'm gonna call you Bell, by the way. Because there's two Sam here, you guys. But I was gonna ask you, do you think the drive that you have from your childhood plays a huge part of your grit being where you are, combined with your dad building the house, then your mom being a nurse? It's amazing how that comes into all the different equation, and then you're like this product, because now you have that compassion for people coming from your mom being a nurse, and then you have your dad building all these houses of you guys growing up. Would you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and it's kind of that motivation factor for me, and this is something we can get back into a little bit later too when it comes around. But just try to make, it's the motivation, the competitive nature, and everything I did, working with some of these professional athletes, what drove me to be really good at what I do, and making sure that I mastered the information that I was passing along with everybody. That was the drive right there. And then, my motivation in school to succeed, I wasn't this tremendous high school student by any means. It's kind of funny to think how there's so many people in high school that are just kind of skating by, and they kind of don't think of themselves as anybody that could succeed in college. But when I really put my mind to it, it's all of these factors that, like you have mentioned, they all kind of came together in one place and just drove me to be good at what I did and master all the information.
Did you play sports growing up?
I did, yeah. Football and baseball, typical American. Kind of wish I branched out a little bit now, but I mean, both of those are both the industries that I worked in, so I can't complain, and pretty happy with it.
I'm gonna do one more, Sam. Sorry, Boyer.
I saw you reposition, so I'm not gonna interrupt. I'll wait.
Do you think that plays a factor of you wanted to be in that career because you played sports too?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely do. And again, I thought my story was unique at the time of playing sports, getting injured, and then that kind of, appreciating what happened, and then going into those routes and those ways. But that was kind of my way of knowing that my 5'5" frame can't be a professional athlete. I realized my limitations as well. It's another big thing for professionals to acknowledge, is that, we're not great at everything, and know your limits. But that was my way of being, sticking with athletes, and because I love the athletic drive and the mindset that these guys have.
I mean, we'll get into that a little further, but to all our listeners out there, I've personally worked with Bell here in relates to, we work out together. He've done some physical therapy with me, and I could tell that the passion that you have for it, even the science, which most of the time it reaches my knowledge in science, because I'm like, dude, I mean, you're talking completely on a different side of the spectrum, and I could tell that the passion is there, and that every time you've worked on me and you've explained things to me, it's completely, I thought I was a peeler, Boyer. This guy is just, every tissue is getting explained to me. I get overwhelmed sometimes, but it was really good because I could see the passion, right? So that's what I have in the background. Boyer, do you have any other questions on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of speak to, I actually really, the more I listened to you talk, I was relating to a lot of your upbringing, because my dad, he didn't work in like building homes, but him and my mom built the home that I grew up in, and he was in different utility service jobs and, physical manual labor for a while. And then my mom was a registered respiratory therapist. So very similar. The one thing we don't have in common is I didn't play football, but swap that out for ice hockey and you got a deal. But no, I really like how you pulled a lot of your drive and work ethic from both of them, because I totally relate to that growing up. So I was just listening to you share that. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of like, putting the pieces together too, where all this comes from. But I wanted to just kind of ask a little bit, because I've never I've been very fortunate. I've never torn like my ACL or something like that, but I know a lot of athletes have. When that happens, you said it was in high school. What year of high school was that in?
It was like the second to last game of my senior year playing football.
What goes through your head when that happens?
Well, it's without getting too into like the medical side of it, but there's a couple different ways you can tear the ACL. And when you kind of tear everything completely, including the nerve fibers, you really don't feel much of anything. Your knee just kind of feels a little full with fluid. And that's kind of where I was. And, at the time we had an athletic trainer who just kind of wrapped some, A strap on there and said, kind of get back out there type of thing. So I actually finished the game, which not a credit to me, but probably, stupidity looking back really. And then, I was like, something doesn't feel right. So we got it checked out and we were thinking something small, and he, came back with, oh, your ACL's torn. And I'm like, the whole world's crashing down, because of course everything that happens in high school is like the biggest moment in your life, and it, the biggest moment that'll ever be at the time, but again, I think about what would happen if I didn't do that. Where would I be today? I don't think I'd be in the same position I'd be today at all. So it's, I'm thankful that it happened, because as much as I wish because it cut out my senior year playing baseball, which I thought was one of the biggest parts that hurt, because at the time, they kind of based it on the amount of discomfort I was in, and I really wasn't in too much pain. So they kind of put the surgery off. If the injury happened in November, I don't think I had the surgery until March, which was really frustrating. And looking back, that's something where, I tell everybody now, be your biggest advocate as a patient. I wish I had done the same thing, because not that I would have made my baseball season necessarily, but I would have had a shot. And what we ended up doing did not leave the opportunity for me at all.
Definitely. No, thank you for sharing that. And you hit on something I thought you might, like in high school, any like major injury. I've had plenty of friends who I honestly know would have gone pro even in hockey had they not injured specific things that are almost unrecoverable from. Yeah. So no, I just wanted to get your perspective on that. But Fitz, I'll pass it back to you. I know you got more questions.
No. I'm glad that you touched base on that, Boyer, because that was my next question. But I know that like it's funny how we both kind of in the same frequency. But I was gonna say that, do you think that let's talk about the injury for a little bit here. Do you think that kind of sparks on what made you wanted to be a physical therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciated the whole role that they had in getting me better and get me back to sports and everything like that. And 100%, that was really what sparked my interest in kind of becoming an athletic trainer. Because to me, the athletic training role is very different from the physical therapist, even though sometimes they're used interchangeably. But obviously the athletic trainer is more on the field, more on the ice, more there for these injuries that happen, and acute injuries on the field. Sometimes could be anything from concussion management to injury on the field. So it's, just how I wanted to stay with sports and stay involved.
It's amazing how an injury like that could literally change your perspective, because with me, when I got injured my shoulder, which you're working on, Belle, and also with my car accident with my neck, it's almost like now everybody that has a cervical issue that comes to me, I'm super careful. And then, it kind of just more spark of your passion of you wanted them to make them feel better, like you could do everything that you can and explain everything you can to make this individual feel better. So it's amazing how that works, in the fitness and trainer perspective, no, but thank you. I mean, just shifting gear here a little bit, I wanted to touch base on the sports life with you, and with athletes, because what really got me is like, I wanted to, if you could walk us through how that life was. And I know about it because we're good friends. But to our listeners out there, how it's like living, like how you felt living that life, good and bad, of course. But I wanted to really just maybe, just like what we've done in the beginning, we could have an overview, but then I'll peel it. Boyer is smiling because like this what is gonna.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I could go on for
walk
days
us through,
here,
yeah.
and I mean,
Yeah.
the biggest thing, you know, it's always like first rule when you get in there is everything that stays inside these walls stays in inside the walls. It doesn't leave. Nothing goes on social media. I've seen interns come in for day one and leave day three because they put up something on social media, and so that's just me prefacing with you know what I hear in there, what I see in there. I kind of block from my memory. So I might even as I start talking, I might start remembering things. But yeah, you know, the truth is it's to survive in that setting, you really need to push things out that you see and just kind of forget about them. Cause some of the things that, you know, I tell my wife or something, it just sounds so ridiculous. Like as I'm saying it, I feel like I'm making up the stories because that's just the different characters you meet. And it's amazing because they're awesome people. And you know, number one, it's amazing and humbling that to work with this population because they trust their career in me. You get to know these guys that in ways where their families and children don't even know them. You know, you think about your work, the work people, you know, and you know, your family you have at home, but they don't, you know, when we end up spending you know, 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. with these guys, you learn so much more about them than even their family gets to know. You learn about what motivates them. You know, that's the biggest thing. And again, adds to me and why I'm able to connect with these people, because a lot of these guys, they don't go to college for education. You know, they go to excel in sports and get to the next level. You know, a lot of these guys, they don't have a plan B, you know, they don't have somewhere to fall back on. So it's motivation for them is that they have no other way to feed their families and put food on the table. You know, that's what drives them. And, you know, working with these populations, sometimes you see the desperation and how they will do anything to get good at what they do. You know, it's definitely one of the most demanding settings to be working in. Everybody expects perfection, from the coaches to the front office to, you know, the rest of the staff and players, especially. You know, I've been chewed out plenty of times in my career for doing what I thought was right. You know, I can think of one moment in particular where, you know, you can imagine a facility where it's a giant lunchroom. There's probably about 75 to 80 people in there. And, you know, a certain coach has a certain thing he wants to bring up, and it's right there in front of every single person there. And he's yelling and screaming at me in front of these people, and there's nothing I can do but sit there and take it. And that's, you know, you talk about the good with the bad, you take it, you move on, you know, you kind of put it in the back of the head and just try not to dwell on it.
You know, while you're talking, I could feel the adrenaline around this whole event that happens, right? I feel that it's similar a little bit with fitness in a much larger scale, because, you know, when you're in the side of things, the adrenaline is so high that you almost has to match their drive. Would you say that happened to you, and what made you kind of stay doing this career? Because it's almost like their drive, almost like you have to match them with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, you always see that standard phrase of, you know, find a line of work that you enjoy and you'll never work a day in your life.
Sure.
That's how it was for me. I mean, you know, you put all that bad stuff aside, and I loved it. You know, all that bad stuff included, you know, the long days, getting yelled at, like that's just the football culture. It is what it is. But yeah, you know, it's everybody kind of pushed each other to get better. You know, they pushed me to know my stuff in and out. And that's when, you know, I would use myself as a test dummy with, if certain guys had certain injuries that I could not figure out, I would spend the next week targeting my own workouts to try to figure out what would help them the best. I had to have a lot of questions about nutrition. So, you know, this pushed me to, I value, you know, when I tell people to do something nutrition wise, it's because I've tried every diet out there. I started out going vegan. I went vegetarian, and, you know, on paper, my blood work actually looked amazing, but I felt like complete garbage. You know, and that's it. I mean, what I'll say is obviously a different diet works for everybody, but, you know, because of that, I felt like I needed to drink more coffee. I needed to take more naps. So I started adding different things to my diet, and I saw firsthand how adding fish, adding red meat, going low carbohydrate, high fat, just how it impacts everybody differently. So at least that way I could make, an educated decision to these players who are using my word as gold for their career. And just that kind of thing, really helped push me to stay in that setting. We talk about dry needling because without violating too many HIPAA rules, certain present company included, when I would be needling these guys, I would use myself as an example. Like, okay, if their knee hurts, what can I needle on myself? I would go home at night and I would be needling myself. We put in, between 20 to 30 to 40 needles in myself to see what made me feel good and what would really help them the most. And that's really what drove me. I don't know if perfection is the right word, but really trying to help out, because when the team wins, you win. And winning a Super Bowl with Baltimore Ravens was amazing. It was one of the greatest feelings in the world, but how you get there is the whole other thing. Everybody sees what's on TV, but the behind the scenes is really what brought me to, do my best to, push myself.
Yeah. I mean, while you're talking about it, it's like we're under the hood, right? Like we're seeing the real deal. Boyer, do you have anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I'm really listening and taking it all in, because I'm trying to
Same.
like imagine being in the locker room with all these people that everyone else is seeing on TV, and they may get a glimpse of you, sidelines or whatever, and how that is. But I'm kind of curious, did you ever, I guess, get into situations where, not like positive or negative, but just like any ones that were like in the limelight a little bit, or did you have those interviews or potential like media interactions, or did you kind of stay out of that area?
I made a point to stay out of any sort of cameras. We'd have plenty of people asking us questions, and it was just the typical no comment. And, especially when, as an intern with the Miami Dolphins, and I happened to be there, the year Nick Saban, he left and went to Alabama. So, I mean, you couldn't get out of the parking lot without being bombarded with reporters. It didn't matter who you were. They just wanted to comment. So I kind of prided myself on staying away from any sort of microphone, but, look at me today, so things that, times have changed a little bit, but yeah.
That's awesome.
No.
Yeah, I caught that joke. I don't know if you got it, Fitz. we finally got some comments from Sam Bell.
There you go. No, I mean, it's definitely eye-opening, I would say, Boyer, right? That's the right word. And very valuable too, because a lot of times we're just seeing what's out there and how they perform. For me, the real person really to thank for are persons like you, Bell, that actually work with these guys completely, like 24/7. Would you say that because you're with them pretty much 24/7,
so on call. Yeah.
I mean, I know the stories when we talk about it on how busy you get. I think this would be a good segue, because I know that you've shifted from working with the Ravens and then with Houston Astros after that whole scenario. I guess what I wanted to know is, or for our listeners out there, what prompted the change of actually switching from this completely different, I won't say different life, but different category of your career, because you're still doing your physical therapy. You're still doing a phenomenal job to it. I could attest to that. It's just a matter of what prompted that switch from this huge, glamorous life that people could think of as, okay, Mr. Bell made it, right? And then what made you leave Houston Astros and actually come to California and work for private sector, so smaller private sector?
Yeah. Initially, got that question a lot leaving Baltimore. And it was a combination of a lot of things. They got to backtrack a little bit to really fully answer the question, but the days are long in football. Training camp is about 21 days straight without a break, and those days were going about 5 a.m. to training camp usually goes to about 8:30 to 9 o'clock at night, depending on what kind of mood the coach is in. And that's the honest answer. So that was 21 days straight, and that would lead right into the season. And the season days were a little bit shorter, probably 5:30 a.m. to about 6:30, give or take a little bit. And, you know, you say you do that 7 days a week, that includes weekends, obviously. So it's pretty much from July to however far you go, and hopefully January and February, you're doing that same schedule. And pretty quickly after that, you're looking at April starting up with practices and gradually building up to a mini camp at the, June, July, or, kind of that segment. So it's really busy. And, obviously, I got married in 2016. So kind of from then on, like, obviously, I still valued the work, but it's also, I started to kind of see the benefits of being with my wife a lot. But we still, I still loved it enough. She moved to Baltimore about then, and we actually really enjoyed Baltimore. But then she was playing intramural soccer. And in being in a city league, the game didn't actually start till about 11:15 at night. So, wow, you see where I'm going here, because it's obviously you're just opening the door for injuries. And she's a little 5'0" frame, hell of a soccer player, though. I love watching her play because she'd run all around the guys, and you'd end up seeing these guys doing all these penalties, like holding on her shirt, like trying to push her down, and she would still get by them. She was a hell of a winger. And it happened to be in February when I was at the NFL Combine, which takes place in Indianapolis. She happened to be playing that night that I was there, and she had got a rebound from, I think it was off the post, and she went to kick it in. And I think it was a goalie who was about 6 feet tall, just came in, and when she was planning, took out her left knee. So it was an actual knee dislocation, not just like a patella dislocation where go ahead, put it back in place type of thing. But this is one where, the worst case scenario is you're actually worrying about leg amputation because of the vascular complications. Wow. So I'm hearing about all this from a hotel in Indianapolis. So you can imagine where my head's going. So kind of from then on, she actually needed 3 surgeries. So it's kind of a rough go because, she couldn't, she couldn't leave the house. I was her only real mode of communication, and I would be gone from 5 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., whatever the hours were. So when I get home, I'd be exhausted from giving those guys everything I had. And then I got home, and, this is nothing against my wife, but she wanted to talk, and we had to do a rehab. And it led to us getting in more fights than anything, just because we were both exhausted. She was not in a very good physically able position. She couldn't even get up and walk. She tore 4 ligaments, and, it was a pretty serious issue. So, kind of from then on, I don't remember exactly what year that was, but that was probably about a year before we ended up making the decision to leave. But it just made things very stressful on our end. So we got to, I think it was 2018. So I'd been with the Ravens for 6 years at that point. And it was just kind of going forward is either I had to make the decision, either it was to stay married or stay married to the Ravens. Sure. And so at that point, we had made the decision to move on. And it was a very tough decision. And that was when we said, my wife's sister lives in California. Let's just go there. We'd never do it, in a million years, but we have the opportunity now. We're young enough. Let's do it. So we did the road trip out to California, and, ended up staying there for 8 months, which is when I met you, obviously.
I'm always in the right time, the right place, buddy.
and we had no intentions of leaving. I had no intentions of getting back into professional sports at that time. But we were just decided to live our lives, and we actually ended up getting pregnant, which was great. It was planned. It was, it was amazing. And like I tell people, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. But at that point, our priorities shifted again. I was working kind of part-time and enjoying life. My wife was the one who was really working her tail off. And, about that 5-month pregnancy mark, she was having a tough time working. And I had actually turned down a job with the Houston Astros, I think 3 times already. And he actually called back, and I said, we're actually going to consider it this time. And, so that led to getting into the professional sports again. And then 2 years down the road, with COVID, that kind of changed everything as well. In baseball, just to keep the conversation short, in baseball, you had basically your main, main area of playing. So like you had Houston, which was the main site, and then they had an alternate training site, which was in Corpus Christi, which I know Boyer, that area well, just being from Texas. But they had me down at the alternate training site I think I was there for 45 days last year without my family. And that hit hard, as far as, and it's not like, we were in the hotel, we couldn't leave because they were fining people. They were sending people home who were violating these rules.
Yeah.
And we had to isolate when we were done at the ballpark for the day. So, I was doing everything. We were all doing everything we could to keep the season going because it was barely hanging on last year. I still think it's a miracle that they made it through. And I think baseball, hats off to them because they did a great job of pulling it off. So at the end of the year, I figured they had a full year to figure out what to do. And then it hit, and then they, hit me with the news, hey, you're going to be going back to the alternate training site for the entire season in 2021. And, I told them straight up, I'm either going to end up a married man or I'm going to end up a Houston Astro. It's not going to be both. And, I told them I just couldn't do it. And it was kind of an awkward silence. It was where I was thinking to myself, this is the time to say, hey, we'll do whatever we wanted, whatever we can do to keep you aboard. Nothing ever came. So we made a difficult decision to move back out to California, but I think it was the right decision. I'm sorry if that was a long-winded explanation of how I got here, but there's really no short way of saying that.
I'm enjoying it, Boyer. I don't know about you. I'm fascinated by this story.
This is like a movie through words in action right before us. This is awesome. No, it's or go ahead, Fitz.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I didn't realize I had my timeline messed up. I didn't realize you were still working even up through that initial part of COVID and everything. That's gotta have been crazy because each sport went through its own version of dealing and handling it, but I can only imagine that's actual next level quarantine and isolation. You know what I mean?
It was brutal. We were getting tested every other day. Just so much isolation, so much PPE, just our personal barriers and trying to keep, it's impossible, the locker room, just how tight you get with people. But at the whole time we're the ones who are responsible for maintaining social distance rules, which it's just something difficult to pull off. And that's why I think you saw some teams not do great at it last year. And again, our head guy with the Astros did a tremendous job of kind of leading the charge and setting a good example for everybody else to follow. That's, I think, one of the reasons why, we were able to get through the season with minimal issues regarding the coronavirus.
Yeah. Let's add on to, you had Sammy then too. Your little one.
That was a whole nother, that was 2019. So my first year with the Astros. He was born in May, which is right in the middle of the season. I got my 1 day of paternity leave. So right after birth, I had 1 day off, and then it was right back to getting after it.
So let me make this clear. You were only with your wife 1 day during the pregnancy when she get Amanda, shout out.
He said she was a badass woman already, but that just sealed the deal.
Yeah. Here's another proof. So shout out, Amanda, to you. Yeah. But I think we're doing good in time, Boyer. We can edit this out, but Fitz, make sure to edit this conversation out. Do you want to cut this in 2 parts, or how are we doing this?
I'm totally up for whatever. If you want to keep going, as far as your questions and stuff, and also it's up to you, Sam, if you want to keep going.
I got time. I feel like, funny thing is, I feel like we've hardly even gotten
scratched the surface. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do 2 parts because, honestly, dude, you're doing good. And this is I'm quiet because sometimes I'm usually, me, Boyer, I would write notes and all this, but right now I'm no, I want to keep going, keep talking because I have a lot of questions still, Boyer. So yeah. Do you want to cut this out and then we'll still record, but I'll just do an outro and then I'll do an intro again for part 2. Is that good?
Perfect.
All right. So I'll do it right now. I'm going to improv. All right, guys, that was our first part with Mr. Sam Bell. We're going to do this in 2 parts because we want to make sure that we don't just scratch the surface. We actually go in depth. I swear I need to have a t-shirt that says peeler. Sam, do you have anything else before we close this out?
No, to your point exactly. I feel like we literally have just scratched the surface. So really looking forward to separating this out and make it palatable for people, because I know they're going to want to listen to both. So thank you, Sam, for
Absolutely.
this part one, and Fitz, I'll hand it back to you.
Yep. So just a quick contact information for us, you guys. You guys could contact us at alohafitsam@gmail.com and all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest,
TikTok.
TikTok, Twitter, and also respectively on LinkedIn under Fitz DeSanto and Mr. Sam Boyer. I'll close this out by saying that every small victory is worth to be grateful for. We'll see you guys soon. Look out for part 2.
Take care.
It's good.